After Donald Trump's Mideast trip earlier this year, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates launched an ongoing political and economic blockade of Qatar. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was reportedly one of the only White House advisors encouraging the hard line. Now, The Intercept reports that just a few months before the crisis, Kushner's real estate company tried and failed to get a $500 million investment from Qatar's former prime minister. That revelation prompting this headline from Vanity Fair. Is Kushner punishing Qatar over a soured real estate deal? Last July on AM Joy, we were wondering about the curious coincidence of Jared Kushner's failure to secure an investment from Qatar before he reportedly advised Donald Trump to support the Saudis' damaging blockade against the country. Well, this week, the plot thickened with an Intercept story about a previously unreported New York meeting last April, just weeks before the blockade, in which Kushner's father unsuccessfully tried to make a deal with Qatar's finance minister to invest in the Kushners' debt-laden property at 666 Fifth Avenue. Joining me now are MSNBC political contributor Timothy O'Brien, foreign policy analyst Rula Jibril, and former State Department senior advisor Nayyera. And Rula, you were on that show with us when we last November readdressed this issue, attempting to get some answers on it. I want to play a little bit of a clip from the show that you were actually on, and this was November of 2017, regarding our attempts to get answers on Jared. We did attempt to get some answers from the White House just about the Kushner visit, and we put some questions on the table. I'm going to put them up on the screen. We asked what was Jared Kushner doing in Saudi Arabia approximately 10 days before several Saudi princes were arrested as part of an anti-corruption probe there. We asked, was 666 Fifth Avenue discussed with any Saudi official during the visit? Has Jared received any offers or actual assistance, refinancing, or selling the building? Has Jared Kushner initiated any contracts related to the refinancing or sale of the building? So far, we have not been able to get answers to these questions from the White House. So, Rula, you know, it seems that the leadership in Qatar, the emir there, has been reluctant to really throw Jared under the bus here in terms of admitting that their failure to help him finance his building may have been at the root of their then being blockaded and him supporting it. What do you make of their kind of reluctance to weigh in? Because it does seem that now they may be more willing to go to Robert Mueller.
Let's explain to our audience who are these countries. So we have our relationship, America's relationship with Qatar, that has strong economic ties because of their oil and gas and because of ExxonMobil and what we get from Qatar. But also there's the biggest military base in the Middle East that Qatar is hosting. Trump principles in foreign policy was the world is taking advantage of America. They need to pay more. That was his principle. Jared Kushner sent his father, as you said before, to get $900 million actually from the Qataris. The deal collapsed. Immediately after, Trump was advised by Kushner against actually the advice of the State Department and the Pentagon to back the Saudis and the Emiratis. In this case, Qatar that is now is punished for three reasons. Once because of the rivalry between these states, the Emiratis, the Saudis, and Qatar, and because of their support to the Arab Spring. But on the other hand, Kushner is punishing them because he's using the presidency to get some financing for his troubled building 666 Fifth Avenue. What we are seeing, the Qataris don't want to meddle in any investigation because they're really concerned that they will be punished further by Trump and this administration. Joy, what we are seeing is we're seeing two sides of this administration. Tillerson and Mattis that were critical of this blockade. Mattis immediately had an armed deal with the Qataris, regardless the fact that Trump was tweeting against Qatar in support of the blockade. We discovered that the Emirati ambassador in Washington, D.C. was heavily lobbying Jared Kushner. And one of the reasons why Jared Kushner didn't have full security clearance is because our security community does not trust him because he's heavily indebted, because his debts could be used as leverage to blackmail him or bribe him.
And, you know, Nayyera, this whole situation is unprecedented, first of all. But, you know, you were a person for the State Department. Is there any precedent in your memory for, A, the cutting out, essentially, of the Secretary of State in a matter of such grave foreign policy? As Rula mentioned, Qatar is not an incidental country to the United States. We host thousands, I think more than 10,000 American military there. There's a lot of relationships with American universities and universities in Qatar. This is a nation that we've had good relationships with. But to cut that off and to take Saudi Arabia's side in a blockade of that country, cutting out the Secretary of State, is there any precedent for that? And then to say nothing of the fact that there may be a tie to Jared Kushner's personal finances.
There's absolutely no precedence for cutting out not just the Secretary of State, but to have an American ambassador sitting in Qatar literally wake up one morning to find out that all the Americans that she represents there, it's about 15,000 civilians, about 12,000 people on base, literally woke up that next morning, realized that they were blockaded on air, land, and sea by allies, their allies, and that their country abandoned them in that situation. No precedence for that at all, and that is what you have when you have imbalance. The idea of U.S. power in the region is to have balance, not take sides, to use leverage and our status around the world to do what is in the best interest of the United States, not what is in the best interest of a particular family, and certainly not what is in the best interest of just the Saudi regime. And let's be clear, it is a regime. Mohammed bin Sultan is the king. He is the king of chaos in the Middle East. Him and the Iranian powers have spread chaos, supported different sides in Syria, different sides in Yemen. It is not in the United States' interest at all to support extremist agendas coming out of Saudi Arabia. But as we saw, all you have to do with the Trump family is throw them a big party and dance with an orb and some swords, and then they will definitely back up your interests, even if it undermines U.S. diplomacy overseas.
You know, Tim, and my colleague and friend Chris Matthews, sort of likes to call the Trumps the Romanovs, like so the American Romanovs. But there is a kleptocratic tinge to almost everything that they're doing. You have Jared Kushner coming into government, not taking a salary, which begs the question, well, what is he getting, right? He's in charge of this business roundtable where he's meeting with, corporations. He's in charge of Middle East policy, despite the fact that his family business does business with Israeli financiers. He's trying to do business with Anbang from China. So he's got this dual role. We learned this week that a few things. We learned that officials in 4 countries have privately discussed ways they can manipulate Jared Kushner by taking advantage of his complex business arrangements, financial difficulties, and lack of foreign policy experience. We learned that Kushner's family business received loans after White House meetings with private equity groups, Apollo Capital Management, loaning them $184 million, and Citigroup $325 million. This feels like a pure kleptocracy at this point.
I think, Donald Trump ran for president, I think, initially as a marketing campaign. I don't think he really thought he was going to win. And he's run repeatedly in the past for the same purpose, to enhance his business prospects. And he came in with family members around him who had no experience or, I think, real interest in governing, but they did have a very strong interest in using the public offices of the United States and the offices of the presidency to possibly line their own pockets. And this last week has really given us a series of revelations about Jared Kushner, built upon what we already know over the last year about Chinese and Russian financial influence over him, that round this picture out quite a bit. And he ends up looking a little bit like Randall, the skinny, nebulous lizard in Monsters, Inc., who disappears into the wallpaper and then comes out again after having listened to everything in the room and then starts arranging the pieces to serve his own needs. And what you have this week with Jared is he's vulnerable because he's inexperienced, and foreign powers know that. At least we know from intelligence briefings that the UAE, China, Israel, and Mexico all believe this. They know that he's an easy mark because his business is in trouble. The single largest poster child for his ineptitude in business is 666 Fifth Avenue. His father goes to prison. Jared gets the family money. He overspends on a building, and he's had to spend the last 2 years scrambling to keep that afloat because the Kushners have a massive debt rolling down the tracks at them. And now you get another category in this, the UAE and Qatar and the Saudis, all manipulating him to their own devices.
Yeah, there is a $1.2 billion balloon payment due on 666 Fifth Avenue next January.
That's right.
And that is a heck of of a piece of leverage for a lot of these other countries to have on an American official in the White House. Tim O'Brien, Rula Jibril, Nayyera Haq, thank you guys. Sorry we had less time because we went long on guns today. Coming up.